Now, like I mentioned before, React is all about components. Everything we see here, this app.js file, this is a component named app. It's an app component. And inside of the app component, it's just a function. A component is just a function, and it's a function that returns something that looks like HTML. This weird HTML looking type thing is called JSX. Capital J, capital S, capital X, JSX. And JSX essentially is a funny tag syntax, and you can read about introducing JSX here in the docs. Again, the docs are excellent. There's lots of great code examples. Some of them use the old version of React, and so I'm going to be mostly exploring the new version of React, and that's what we'll teach here in this modern React course, but it is nice to at least go through it and see all of the core principles and concepts behind React. And this right here, this JSX, is something we'll see quite a bit. And JSX is essentially just, it allows you to write your JavaScript inside your HTML. And so we'll be exploring that in a second, but you can see it happening here, where we have source equals, and then these squiggly brackets, and then the variable logo, which contains this logo.svg that we see rendered here. So this is just us inserting a variable inside our HTML. Instead of having to construct a string and do all fancy stuff, we insert variables into our JSX like this. And so again, this is all called JSX. This app component is just a function that returns JSX. And that JSX gets turned into HTML by React. Now, there's one other important thing to know about components, is that we can't actually use the word class inside a component. Because class is a reserved word thing in JavaScript, we can't use the word class, and so instead they use the word class name for classes, for styling. And that's really the biggest. There's a couple other differences here, but that's the biggest one. The second biggest one is that every tag needs to have a closing tag to it. So this image tag right here, if we leave this off, React will throw an error. It'll say, hey, by the way, expected corresponding JSX closing tag for image. So make sure you close all of your tags, because every tag has to have a close on it. If it doesn't, it'll throw an error. That's the biggest thing to it. And so we're going to actually create a new component here. We're going to be building a playlist generator application. And so I'm actually just going to get rid of everything here. Don't get mad at me. I'm just going to delete it all. Actually, no, I'm going to leave the div class name app. I'm going to delete everything else, though. It's gone. We no longer need this component. All that. I'm actually delete everything inside app.css. And yeah, the rest of that's fine. Cool. This looks good. So this is what my app component looks like at the moment. Map.css, save, and in here, I am going to create a div with a class name equals playlist. Now, I could start writing my playlist at JSX or HTML right here, but a better way to do that in the React way is to construct components, and each component holds all of the logic, style, functionality that is encapsulated for exactly that entity. And what that means is if I want to write a playlist component, I can have two different components that hold a playlist. Well, first let's create a folder called components, and inside that directory, let's create a file called playlist.js, and every song we'll just call a track.js. So each of these components are going to store all of the presentation, style, and functionality for a track, and the presentation, style, and functionality for a playlist. So they encapsulate that, is what we would call it. And so then here I can just say function playlist, and we capitalize them, by the way, when you're writing new functions. And I'm going to return exactly what I had here, which is a div with a class name of playlist. And then I'm going to export default playlist. Now, another way you might see me write this is just to do it all in one line. Export default function playlist. And that's really all you need to get started. So here's our playlist, and I'm just going to say h1 playlist. I'm going to save this, and since I'm exporting it right here by default, in the application, or in the app component, I can just say import playlist from ./components/playlist. And then I can use it right here. And then I can save and go check out my application, and I have an error, but now it's no longer errored, and ta-da, my playlist is there. Now, the rest of this works pretty similarly. We can just add styles to our app.css, or we can have individual styles, whatever we want. But let's go ahead and style this and add some fancy styles in the next video. And then we'll also start building out these components.